Hi, everybody. Good evening and good morning, and welcome to the rise of HXM, Human Experience Management. I'm your host, author and HR consultant, Laurie Ruettimann. HXM is the evolution of HCM. It's all about putting employees and their experiences at the center of everything. Moving beyond simply supporting HR transactions to a new world and thinking about what people need to be successful and to do their best. Today, we are so happy to have Dr. Tanvi Gautam, best-selling author, HR thought leader, and my dear friend, to help us really rethink what HXM can mean in your organization and putting HXM practices in your organization across APJ. So with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Tanvi Gautam. How you doing, Tanvi?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Laurie. I always look forward to our conversations.
Well, I am super pleased to join you this morning in an awesome discussion that we're going to have about HXM. But before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself to our global audience? We have people from around the world tuning in to learn about HXM and its applications in the APJ region.
Well, I'm live streaming to you from my home in sunny Singapore at the moment. And it is morning, mid-morning here, unlike the US where it's night. So I really appreciate, Laurie, you being here.
Sure.
I spend my life at the intersection of the potential of humanity and technology. And I spend a lot of time with senior leaders across the globe thinking about how we can create a workforce and leaders that bring more humanity into the workplace, not just technology. I also teach at the Singapore Management University as part of their executive development program.
Well, that is a full career, and I love that you have a little bit of time for us today. And I thought we could get started, first of all, by inviting everybody who's watching us live tonight to participate in the chat. If Tanvi and I can't get to your chat right away, we will jump in afterwards. We will be around, but certainly use this opportunity to build your brand and build your community. Really tap into the amazing people who are there and participate in the chat. But Tanvi, I want to level set because we're in a really interesting time right now. And we're going to talk about HR in the APJ region, but I think it's a little dangerous to be using such general phrases like that. So you tell me, what's the state of HR in APJ?
Well, to borrow from Charles Dickens, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. I think, APJ is such a varied audience when we're talking about HR. And given the whole COVID situation, I tell people it's like a Ferris wheel, right? Economies, some of them are on top right now. Some of them are coming down with their infection rates going up and others are on upswing. So at any given point in time, you could be at a different point of that turn. And so you're right, generalizations are very, very difficult. Yeah. And that means that the challenges for HR are unprecedented. Because if you're in a regional role, for example, you are managing multiple realities at the same time. And if you are in a country-focused role, then you are thinking about how to deal with the reality of processes and policies as they are unfolding in front of you right now, and which may not necessarily track to the global policies that have always been. So that customization is becoming a big challenge.
Really interesting. And I love the Charles Dickens quote, because I think that's something we can relate to in the HR community around the world, the best of times, the worst of times. And I wonder if there is any other topic that's more prominent than COVID right now. And what are some of the lessons that we have been learning? And what are the gaps that we've seen in terms of delivering on this idea of HXM?
I think the other topic is Bridgerton having another season, but I think that's confirmed. So apart from that,
Bridgerton is coming back. It's got to come back.
Right. So apart from that, I think the big conversation, there are a couple of trends that we can talk about. The one that I think is becoming very prominent is, how do we think and talk about performance?
Yeah.
Right. Because I think performance management was already in a state of transition pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Where we moved from that annual appraisal business to it becoming more frequent, just in time, all of that. But now when you don't have the workforce co-located and everybody has gone digital, how do you define performance? How do you appraise performance? How do you support performance? I mean, these questions were always important. Now having gone digital, the answers to these will need to be different than what we have had in the past. So I see that conversation really picking up.
There are so many gaps when we think about the world of, human resources and how HXM could address those gaps. And one of the key components is really rethinking about your going from HCM, the old way of doing things, having a technology first approach that was really reliant on HR's input, HR's calendar, to really putting employees first. And you think that would be a theme in the world of COVID, but again, best of times, worst of times, I think some organizations are still challenged with this idea of putting workers at the center of their activities. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, let's talk about two examples, all right, based right here in Asia. Let's talk about Mindtree, which I know they're using SuccessFactors, but even otherwise, they're an organization that's fairly respected for their practices. They have implemented the technology-based performance management system to create more transparency. And they're talking about something known as right to feedback. And that concept of right to feedback is one that creates a culture where the signal being sent to the employee is, we're actually interested in your career and creating a conversation that is not just a top-down. If I look at, for example, your performance. And if in the previous Ware, we would say, your performance is, 2 out of 5, you really should, how do you explain this? To turning it around and saying, well, if your performance is 2 out of 5, what should I be doing differently? What could I have been doing differently?
Yeah.
And that's where I think that right to feedback is such an interesting conversation, that had you been told in time, had you been supported, had you been given the resources,
right,
could it have been different? And so that co-creation is something we are seeing that is seeping in. But at the other end, one of my clients got fired on a Zoom call, right? And this is a high potential employee with stellar feedback, right? How do you even reconcile something like this? And both these realities coexist. So I think a lot of it just comes down to the leadership and culture in the organization.
Really interesting. Well, I think about the phrase EX that's being used around the world, employee experience. And, first of all, that's such a subjective phrase. But second of all, it means different things to different people in different regions. So let's level set again. What do you think EX means in the ever burgeoning APJ region?
Yeah, I think the employee experience conversation here right now is very much in alignment with how can technology be leveraged, right? So whether it is paperless recruitment or onboarding, or how can we have the pulse of the organization. So there's a proliferation of these apps we see, which is trying to get sentiment analysis from the workforce at any given point in time. So I feel like, what does this really translate to for an organization? We will have to wait and see how it explodes. But the consciousness and awareness that technology can and should be leveraged to create a seamless employee experience is very high. I think there is a huge recognition that when you are using apps on your phone and you're able to get data and access seamlessly and instantly, and then you walk into an organization that's working with a legacy system, that experience is so jarring that it is really something that the HR professionals are thinking about as to how their technology can catch up to provide that experience for the employees where they feel seen, heard, and understood in the times of COVID.
I love that. As we look to the post-COVID world and we think about EX, we dream of a world where people are vaccinated, they're no longer sheltering in place, they're no longer sheltering in their jobs, and they actually exercise their right as consumers of work to go and find work that aligns with their personal vision, their mission, their value in life. What do you think the post-COVID world looks like, and does EX change in the APJ region?
That is such a brilliant question. And, for a moment there, Laurie, I got carried away with the post-COVID picture you were changing. Right? I
Tanvi.
to tell you, keep talking. I was like daydreaming as you were talking, right? I think that a big shift that is already underway and will become even more amplified is the concept of employee preferences. So you see, in the past, HR designed a system or a policy or a process, and then it says, here you go. Here is the system, go forth and use it.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I think the tables are kind of turning around, where we have to take into account the preferences of our employees much more mindfully. So let's talk rewards. I recently saw a survey by Engage Rocket here in Singapore, and they talked about the fact that, everybody likes to choose their rewards and, customize it to themselves. But Generation Z is likely to be 3 times more disengaged if they don't have a choice in the matter. Right? So you have a workforce that is getting used to customizing their work experience for themselves. So they are not keen on you telling them what should be done. They are interested in having a voice in what needs to be done. In another survey they said 89% of employees expect that their employers will take care of the work tech that they have at home, that it is the employer's responsibility. So I think, and even in the US, right, with the whole Google unionization thing that we are seeing, which is quite historic in some ways, I think that employee preferences will become very mainstream, and that co-creation of the work experience will be the future.
I love this idea of employee preference, co-creation. I wonder what everybody else thinks. So I want to encourage people to head over to the chat and to engage that way. But Tanvi, when we think about employee experience and co-creation of that work experience, we can talk ad nauseum about technology, but there is some cool technology out there. So I wonder if you can speak to some of that technology that's being used to really co-create that experience, whether it's, around employee sentiment or, worker satisfaction or worker engagement. What are you seeing? Do you have any case studies that come to mind when we talk about tech?
Yeah, one of the companies that I've been admiring from a distance about this is Grab here in Singapore, and what I find really interesting is that when Grab talks about engaging its employees, it doesn't just talk about people who are on full-time on their payroll. So, this thing about employee preferences is also, one must remember that with the arrival of the gig workforce and, the rise of the freelance economy, HR has to think about not just the community within the organization, but outside of the organization as well. How do we integrate them? How do we I think one of the biggest shifts in HR is learning to have that ecosystem mindset that is enabled by technology. So, Grab, when it's putting out communication and strategies for engagement, is not just doing it for people within the company, but the extended workforce as well. They have been invited onto the platform. And I think that is the magic of technology, that with, a few simple tweaks, your ability to host a larger community goes up. Your ability to get sentiments, your ability to roll out initiatives that would engage them is so much higher at the touch of a button. Asian Paints is another good example. With their employee recognition, by using technology, not only have they expanded the amount and type of input that they get into the organization about an employee, but to celebrate the successes of their employees, they're now amplifying it to a larger audience as well. So I feel like the possibilities with technology are really endless. The challenging part, I think, is not technology. I think it's mindset.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I think there's a lot of different ways we can go with mindset. It used to be, the rumor was that HR was a lagging indicator of where technology was going in an organization. It was really the CFO or the CIO who drove change around people tech and work tech. And I think more and more globally, that is changing, and HR professionals are coming to the table and making the case for change. So I want to check in with you on that and just test that. Is it true that HR professionals are now leading that discussion in the APJ region? And if they are, do they come with data? Do they come with, proof of ROI? Because what's the ROI of treating someone like a human being?
Well, that question requires a whole separate, life stream altogether, the ROI of treating somebody as human. But, I have often said again and again that any enterprise, no matter how digital, will never outrun its human architecture. It doesn't matter. I can give you the best technology on the planet, but if you don't have that sense of empathy, you don't have that sense of wanting to improve the experience of a fellow human being as they go about their work, that technology will never get leveraged the way it should be. But here's the thing. So there are some interesting examples, right? So for example, Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Hong Kong saved, I believe, close to $5 million in recruitment costs by adopting technology and eliminating the excess and streamlining and all of that. And I can tell you, if any CFO is listening to us right now, I'm sure their ears are perked up at the thought of $5 million. So I think somewhere, streamlining processes with technology is allowing us to show how we are, enabling the financial health of an organization, how we are able to do more with less by, streamlining our processes, eliminating the waste and all of that. And the reason why I think that HR tech will be leading the way is because the CIOs, the CTOs, the CDOs, at the end of the day, their focus has been purely tech. But as HR professionals, we are the ones who straddle the words of humanity and technology simultaneously. So that I think HR now more than ever before is poised for the biggest rebirth of the profession, provided they decide to take that shot.
Wow, Tanvi, you've got me excited about human resources, something I've been doing for over 2 decades. Suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it. I wonder if those of you who are listening to us from around the world feel that way. Are you optimistic about the rebirth of human resources and HR technology? Please leave us a comment in the chat. Let us know what you think about your career in the next few months, the next few years, the next decade. We would love to hear about it. Tanvi, COVID isn't the only issue that is facing HR departments these days, although it's something we are obsessed with and we talk about ad nauseum. I wonder what other trends, what other things you're seeing in the marketplace are really driving business dynamics in the APJ region, and what are some of those business processes, technologies that are really making an impact and exemplifying why HXM is so important?
I think the big conversation when it comes to HR tech is asking ourselves, how can we make all the processes, whether it's L&D, like L&D, I think is another trend that is exploding in the region. Being able to get, personalized, artificial intelligence-driven learning capabilities into the hands of the employees is a big consideration. We are seeing, no longer are you being given this, LMS that, you go in and you do it in your own time, but what is it that you need, where you need, when you need it, is becoming a big conversation. Even when it comes to, thinking about what can technology do for us. I think the question has become, how can we keep it simple? How do we make it scalable? And how do we make sure that it is personalized? I think personalization is a huge conversation. And, just given my background in research and teaching, I remember a very, very long time ago, at least in the internet era, it would be considered a lifetime ago, if I might say, there was a phrase that I think Accenture had coined at that time called the workforce of one.
Yeah.
And at that time, technology was not nearly as advanced as it is today. I am actually seeing that translation of workforce of one coming in. How is it that every time your employees interact with the systems, they feel like they're the only, to paraphrase Rihanna, the only girl in the world, right? How do you kind of make sure that every time I log in, I feel that, you have a historical understanding of who I am.
Yeah.
You are keeping in mind where I might be going next. So, it's coming down to things like, tailor-made learning paths, which are individualized to different people at different points of the learning curve, which I think is the magic of technology versus just dumping everything on them. And, what's the phrase they say there, Laurie, that, you throw something at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks.
Spaghetti at the wall, right. I mean, that is a very old school conversation. It just doesn't cut it like that. So I think personalization is a big trend that is going to pervade all systems, not just learning and development. I think even when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to onboarding, how do you make me feel like I matter to you?
I love that conversation around personalization. And years ago, when it started to emerge, we said, oh, it was the millennials that wanted personalization. And that's how we kind of describe that experience globally. And now we have a new emerging, cohort in the workforce, Gen Z, right? These younger workers. Do you think first of all, do you believe in generational discussions at work? And if you do or you don't, what role does a new generation play in driving some of this personalization?
I think this is a great question for the chat, right? For people to say whether they believe in it or not. And I would say that it's not about, whether we are a believer or not a believer, but that there are people, when they come into the workplace, their preferences are colored by the era in which they grew up. I mean, I remember, the iPhone came out just around the time when my son was born. And he walked up one day to the television screen and he tried to swipe the screen, okay? And I had to introduce to him this concept of a remote control. He's like, what is a remote control? Because he expects everything to be touchscreen. Now, it is a reality that the cohorts in the workplace grew up with certain, circumstances and preferences, even in the employer-employee relationships, right? Keep your head down, get the work done. We used to talk about this concept of the iron rice bowl in Asia. The iron rice bowl is these jobs in the banking or foreign services or government services where your rice bowl will always be filled. Now you imagine that mindset as contrasted with the generation that's is setting up their websites and YouTube channels as we speak and believe in having a sense of agency and are very quick to jump ship if they need to. You have to respect that difference. And you have to bring everybody along. My trouble with the intergenerational conversation is too much expectation is being put on Gen X and older generations to understand the younger ones. I think it has to go the other way as well.
Amen to that. As a Gen X lady, I want someone to feel my pain and get me. Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. So I wonder how many Gen Xers we have. We would love to hear from you in the chat. And as we start to think about where this conversation is going around HXM, around the tools, technologies, really putting workers at the center of the conversation and supporting them to work at that intersection of purpose, passion, meaning, I wonder where we get started, Tanvi, because we can lecture people all day long, right? But when the rubber meets the road, HR professionals are saddled with legacy systems that may not be where they want to be in terms of HXM. So give us some thoughts on where we go from here as a profession.
First of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I think HR has really stepped up like never before. I think HR professionals are being courageous and they are being stretched in multiple directions. So let's just give them some credit for where they are and how they're handling it. I think historically, my concern with HR has always been and continues to be that we are not paying enough attention to HR for HR, right? We have always been so focused on the employees, on the leaders, their development, their learning pathways. I think it's time to kind of turn the focus a little bit inwards, because as they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. Mm-hmm. So historically, the investment in HR has not happened because, oh, well, you know what, we see you as a back office function. Well, you're going to pay the cost for it now.
Yeah.
And so it's not late even now for us to start thinking about how do we want to invest in our HR professionals to begin with. Right. And technology will take care of itself. But things like having an attitude of allyship with our business leaders, having that ability to navigate difficult conversations and translate the imperatives of HR for business. Mm-hmm. These are things that are skills that will have to be learned and learned overnight. We are out of runway. We're out of runway.
Well, not only, sorry, please.
No, so it has to be done quickly and mindfully, because every investment that is made in HR tech, HR professionals will determine the ROI, Laurie, on the enterprise's future.
Well, I love what you're saying around a reinvestment in ourselves, in our own focus, and a real renewed commitment to doing HR for HR. I wonder if we can leave this conversation just real briefly talking about burnout and resilience, because that is a global topic that everybody's talking about. Can you address that in the APJ region and advice, thoughts on an HR practitioner facing burnout and resilience themselves?
I think resilience is a topic that we see a lot of firms are taking up quite seriously. I think for the first time, I'm seeing posts from senior leaders around topics of mental health. Mm-hmm. We are finding that companies and HR heads are asking, yes, we are providing technology for work purposes, but how are we going to use technology to reduce isolation, which is a big topic. People are, sitting inside their homes. How do we make them feel connected? One of the companies I was hearing to have introduced something called the coffee roulette, where they have a technology and you don't know which of your colleagues from which part of the world will turn up with a cup of coffee. And so you get to know that individual and they get to know you, and you swap experiences. Or, like Corteva, which is a client of mine, they decided during Christmas they wanted to do a virtual Christmas tree competition in every home and see how they could bring together. So I think that the way we are addressing the issues of resilience is becoming a lot more open-minded around mental health conversations, something that has traditionally been a taboo topic in Asia in particular. And also HR starting to think about, how can I build that community, use technology not just for work, but reducing isolation and bringing people together in social ways.
Really interesting stuff. Well, leave us with some parting words about your thoughts, your feelings around HXM, the promise, the opportunity in the APJ region.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say that, the time is now or never. I think HR is in the spotlight, and we need to be making most of this moment. And at the end of the day, the more human a workplace, the greater the productivity, the greater the efficiency. If you get the humanity of the workplace right, everything else will take care of itself.
Brilliant, Tanvi. Thank you so much for being our guest today. Everybody, you can find Dr. Tanvi Gautam online, anywhere, LinkedIn, Twitter. She's all over, just publishing really great insights. And we're just so grateful to speak with you today. And next week on our HXM journey, we have a wonderful guest by the name of Gary Ware. My co-host Lars Schmidt is going to join me, and we're going to talk to Gary Ware about the business impact of HXM, specifically related to KPIs. I promise you, it's going to be fun. It's going to be amazing. So until next time, everybody, and for Dr. Tanvi Gautam, I'm Laurie Ruettimann, and it was great to see you on the Rise of HXM. Bye.